Alrighty. So I haven't done a comedy horror in a while. What was the last one I did? Oh, was it Tucker and Dale? I've been neglecting comedy a little bit, so my bad. Anyway, we got this absolute classic, Dracula Dead and Loving It from 1995, directed by Mel Brooks, with that typical kind of humor. So let's take a look. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it for whatever reason, you've been warned. Yeah, so let's go. So we got, it follows essentially the same general story of Dracula. I mean, I almost feel like I'm basically going to be repeating some of the things that I said for the Nosferatu 2024 movie, because they're both pretty much based on the same book and story, so... But whatever, we'll try to fly through it quickly. The thing that sets this one apart, obviously, are the jokes and gags and whatnot that are throughout the entire film. It's, yeah, makes Dracula look a little bit like a bumbling idiot, which is a good time always. But yeah, it starts off the same way. We've got Thomas Renfield coming to Transylvania, and he's gonna sell Drac a place in London or whatever. And he stops at the village, and the villagers are all like, "Whoa, Dracula, blah." She's like, there's this one woman in the village who like tries to convince him, like, take this cross for protection, take it. And he's like, no, that's fine. She's like, take the damn cross. He's like, okay, that'll be $15 or whatever. So she just suckered him into buying something. That was kind of funny. A lot of even in the States, honestly, was when I was in DC, there were people that would do that. Like, I saw people giving out like prayer beads and stuff, and then they're like, okay, now money. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't ask. Anyway, that was funny. Whatever. The driver refuses to drive him, obviously, like the horse carriage driver. So he's like, okay, I'll just walk then, that's fine. Anyway, he comes in there and gets to the castle eventually, and the doors open by themselves, and Dracula's at the top of the stairs, and he's like, Count Dracula, whatever. And of course, Dracula slips on a bunch of bat shit and falls down the stairs. And he's like, oh my god, are you okay? He's like, it will take more than that to hurt me, whatever. But then you see his shadow, like, holding his back in the background. They do the whole shadow manipulation thing from, like, Dracula. So initially, like, it comes down the stairs, like, rah, or whatever. But, yeah, it has a life of its own that adds to the comedy of it. So they sign the thing. They sign the paperwork, and he gets his paper cut like he does and draws blood as usual, like in the main story. But it's splurting out like crazy. Like, it must have hit an artery. And of course, Dracula's just like, num, 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 num. Making those noises and stuff. Whatever. That's a little ridiculous. But then I guess he stays the night at the castle because it's a bit of a ride, right? Bit of a trek from London to Transylvania. So he stays overnight, and that's when the brides of Dracula come. So those aren't in Nosferatu, obviously, but the beautiful vampire women that's coming. The accent is horrible, but you're going to be hearing a lot, so I apologize in advance. The beautiful vampire women are coming in to do their thing, to seduce him and drink from him, and he's all like, no, God, this is wrong. I can't do this. And he's like resisting briefly, and then he's like, oh God, wrong me. Wrong my brains out. That's the line. And then the delivery here is awful, but it was entertaining in the movie. Anyway, Drac interrupts, and he's like, guys, come on, like, knock it off, alright? And then they're doing their hovering thing with the choir. He's like, and stop that! And they lower themselves, and the choir stops, and they just walk off, like, all nonchalant. Oh, boy. Then he hypnotizes... He's gonna make Renfield his little bitch, obviously, right? Because that's how the story goes, so they're gonna keep with that. So he's the hypnotizing, he's like, your eyes are getting heavy, and he falls asleep, like, instantly. And he's like, no, Renfield, wake up. You gotta let me finish, dude. Anyway, he does it again, he falls asleep again, he's like, oh my god, this guy's a simpleton. Anyway, eventually does it and gets him under his spell, and basically he's like, you're gonna protect my coffin while we take the boat to London or whatever. We leave in the morning, yada yada yada. Yes, master. And he imparts the, like, I will give you life, but it'll be like bugs and stuff. So that's why he eats bugs in this or whatever. So there's a whole scene about that later. But anyway. Then they cut to the Demeter, which is the famous ship that brought Dracula to either London or brought Nosferatu to Germany or wherever. Whatever version of the story is. Obviously, this is London because it's Dracula. There's a little gag scene of the coffin sliding around unsecured in the cargo bay, and he's just like, as he's hitting walls. And Renfield flies in and tries to fasten it, gets thrown around. Anyway, that's the whole thing. They end up in London eventually, and he heads to the opera to meet his neighbors, who are essentially Lucy and Mina and the Dr. Stewart or something like that, and Jonathan from the main story. They're in here anyway. They're in the opera, and he goes to use his thrall on the usher there, the code attendant or whatever she is. You will tell the doctor that I have a message for him. You will tell him to come to the lobby to get his message. And then she's like, yes. And she goes, and it's like, you will remember nothing that I said. And she, okay, opens the curtains. They turn to her. She's like, closes the curtains again. Goes back to Dracula. Hi, how can I help you? And he's obviously like, you're an idiot. Anyway, that's fun. A lot of gags like that, silly, misunderstanding things. There's a whole other scene. Well, I'll get to it when I get to it anyway. So he's like, fine, I'll just do it myself. And he goes and meets with the doctor. And then the usher person comes in as he's right in the middle of introducing himself and opens the curtain. He's like, there's a message for you in the lobby. And he's like, what? Anyway, he goes to the lobby and Dracula's just left there standing like, oh my god. So he has a little meet and greet, I guess, with Lucy and Mina and John, and he kind of vampire falls for Lucy, the whole thing. And he comes and visits her at night and drinks from her, because that's what Dracula does. But there's a little scene where he's approaching his property is across the street from Jonathan and Mina and all them's property. So he's looking across and he sees Lucy in the window getting ready for bed, and she looks and sees him and she starts not completely disrobing obviously, but back in those days the bloomers are showing and stuff. So anyway, she's acting out a show for him essentially, and goes to bed. She's totally under his influence or whatever. Before she even sees him, she's like, oh, I hope Dracula comes and finishes that conversation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and then he watches and she does the strip thing and goes to bed, and Dracula turns into a bat, and you see little Leslie Nielsen's face on the bat as it's flying over. And she, I guess, is cold, so she shuts the window, and of course, face splat into the glass and slide down, the classic gag. But he rehumanizes and re-enters her suite and whatever, and drinks her blood basically. And then there's a little straw sound, when you're at the bottom of a Slurpee or whatever, because why not, right? At this point, Renfield's in the mental institution. They found him as one of the few surviving people on the Demeter when it crashed into the docks or whatever, or he was the only survivor or whatnot. And he's mad essentially, so they locked him up in the mental institution. And there's a little gag where another inmate, or so you think, is oh, this place will drive you nuts, blah 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 blah, and then you hear someone else from outside saying, guard, get back to duty. And he pulls his head out, yes sir. So it was one of the guards just being a shit. Oh man. Anyway, there's then the next scene is Renfield meets with the doctor there. Essentially, I guess he wants to see how nuts he is or whatever. The whole scene of him eating bugs, and he grabs a beetle off the table and eats it, and the doctor's like, I saw you eat a bug. He's like, I did not. Yes, you did. I saw you grab something off the table. I think it was an insect. And he's like, no, it was a raspberry. A raspberry? They're overly Britishizing the words. I can't do it, but anyway. He's like, oh, it was a raisin. It fell off of this muffin. He's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Anyway, he grabs a spider out of the air and eats it. And he's like, I saw you just eat a spider. And he's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And there's a grasshopper, and he dives under the table to get it. And he says, you are eating bugs off the ground. And the legs sticking out of his mouth. He's like, what are you talking about? Literally, it's sticking out of your mouth. And he sucks it in. No, it's not. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, that's his bug eating gag. There's also an ongoing gag with the doctor who basically prescribes an enema to like everything. So yeah, it's another mental patient and he gets an enema, and I think Renfield gets like 2 or 3 enemas in this, and it's just an ongoing thing. Yeah, and then whatchamacallit, Mina comes to get Lucy, but Lucy's like not feeling good. She's been drained of blood, obviously, so she's looking very sickly, very pale. The doctor comes and examines her and sees the bites. And he's like, is that like a spider bite or whatever? And he's like, you know what, I'm going to call my friend Dr. Van Helsing, or Professor Van Helsing. He's like a medical doctor. He'll know about all this weird stuff. And they're like, isn't he that guy who's like into the supernatural or whatever? And like, yeah, well, you know. But he's like, again, he's a medical doctor. He'll know exactly what it is. All the strange stuff, you know, he's the guy. So Van Helsing arrives, and well, he doesn't arrive yet. They show him at the med school, and he's like doing a dissection to his students or something, and he's basically trying to make his goal to make them all pass out or whatever. So he's like pulling out intestines and hanging them around people's necks, and they're all passing out. And then he gives another guy a brain. He's like, still got it. So that's a thing. Anyway, Drac has like a daymare, he calls it, of where he wakes up and goes out in the sun and then he starts burning, and that's like a whole thing too. Anyway, whatchamacallit, Van Helsing arrives and he examines Lucy, and right away he's like, yeah, that's a vampire, guys. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's not even a real thing. Like, we believe in science, we believe in, you know, factual things, and science doesn't have anything. It doesn't have anything positive to say about the possible existence of the supernatural. It's okay, well, let's think about it this way. She's lost a lot of blood, right? There's no blood anywhere. Where did it go? We're like, ah, shit. Okay. So, she's a vampire. And she says, okay, well, whoever bit her is going to return. At this point, they don't know it's Dracula, but, I mean, they figure it out eventually. He's like, he'll return, and if he drains her completely, she'll become one of his minions or whatever, one of his brides or something like that. So we have to prevent that, obviously. Anyway, cut to the night. Dracula wakes up and rises out of his coffin, like, you know, like a plank or whatever, bangs his head on his chandelier. That's like one of the most famous gags from the thing. It's like, I have to move that chandelier, or at least my coffin or something like that. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, he does that. So yeah, a lot of slapstick, like lowbrow kind of humor, but I mean, it's Mel Brooks and he makes it work, right? So you gotta enjoy that. Anyway, back at Lucy's room or whatever, the Van Helsing is essentially like the best bet right now is to ward him off. So vampires are like, the cleansing properties of garlic or something wards off vampires entirely. So they put her room, they've got like cloves of garlic and strings of garlic like all over the damn place. So yeah, if something's not at the garlic, it ain't coming in that room. There's no way. Dracula, of course, shows up, sees the garlic, he's like, ugh, okay, gross. So he goes to the mental asylum thing and breaks out Renfield and basically tells him to get rid of the garlic, which he starts to do until he realizes there's a lady in the room, and a little bit of a perv scene. He lifts up the blanket and he looks at her, and obviously she screams because that wakes her up, and she sees some weird guy taking garlic down and looking under the sheets at her, and it's just like, ew. Anyway, doctor comes in and sees Renfield, like, okay, back to the mental institution with you, that's disgusting. Give him an enema, because that's the ongoing joke there. And they carry him away. They don't obviously show the enema, but like, but he's, yeah, not into it. Anyway, what was that? Sorry, excuse me. Need some water. Alright, so back to my super professional review and synopsis of the story. Oh god. Yeah, these are like the worst reviews on YouTube, so I don't blame you if you stopped like well before now. And if you've somehow hung on to now, I won't blame you if you stop now either. But let's continue. So Drac basically lures Mina out with her thrall, or not Mina, lures Lucy out with his like mind control thrall thing, whatever you call it. And Mina sees him in the garden drinking the last bit of Lucy's blood, and she screams, and everyone runs out, and Drac takes off. But they didn't catch who he was yet. They're still like on the fence of who it could be, and anyway, she's dead. So that's unfortunate. they do the funeral for her and everything, and Dracula shows up the next day to express his condolences, and they're trying to figure out who it is, and there's like a whole gag with like someone getting the last word. So it starts, he's like, are you related to Dracula? Are you related to the first Dracula, Vlad Tepet? Oh my god. Vlad the Impaler. Goes on and tells him all about his stuff, and it's like, you know, he'd impale people and he'd, you know, drink their blood and all this stuff. And Drac's like, they deserved it. So obviously he is. Anyway, there's a gag with them like speaking to each other. I guess it's in Romani or something. I'm not really sure, but it's another language, and they're going back and forth, and it's a, you know, they both are like, I'm not gonna lower myself to insisting on getting the last word, but they absolutely do, and it goes on, and there's like, they're talking, and Dracula leaves finally, and Van Helsing opens the door and says something out to him and shuts the door, and then a couple seconds later you see Dracula walk by the window and he looks in and says something. It's just an ongoing thing. Anyway, Van Helsing at this point is like, okay, so we need to take care of this Lucy situation. So he's going to turn. We've got to stake her. And they're like, what? Or Jonathan's like, what? That's insane. But yeah, you have to. So they go and they show the staking of the vampire, and he puts the stake and he hammers it in, and Van Helsing gets out of the way quickly, and he's just sprayed with blood, like a ton of blood. Like, for a comedy, this has more blood than actual, like, legitimate horror movies for this scene. And I read somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently Mel Brooks didn't tell the actor that he was going to be sprayed with blood in that scene. So it was like, his reaction was like completely legitimate, and you can kind of almost tell that he almost breaks character. So props to him for continuing. And I'm guessing the scene was ad-libbed or whatnot, because he's like, I think we're good. And he's like, no, you got to do it one more time. So anyway, that was pretty good. Knowing that little backstory made it even more entertaining a little bit. Oh yeah, and then there's another scene too where, just like before they decide that they have to stake her, Van Helsing's trying to explain, like, we have to do this, and he's like, why? She's dead. And he's like, no, she's undead. She's Nosferatu. And then of course Jonathan's reaction is like, she's Italian? Like, okay, sure, why not? Anyway, at this point, Drac returns for Mina, so he's like, oh yeah, Lucy's toast, but we got another hottie in here, so let's get her going. She'll be my new bride. Or maybe that was his goal from the beginning. I don't know. Anyway, he drinks from Mina, and the next day she wakes up and has like a little scarf around her neck, and she's acting a little bit more sexually aggressive, let's say, to Jonathan. And John's like, no, God, no. Oh, also, yeah, so when he went to stake Lucy, she initially did appear to him and come on to him and say, listen, I know you always wanted me or whatever, before she retreated into her thing and they staked her and all the blood. But anyway, so Mina, I guess they're turning into like the vampire sisters at the castle that are all like using seduction to lower people's nerves and then take a bite or whatever they gotta do. So I guess that's their thing. Anyway, Mina's all coming on to him. She's like, touch this and touch this. And then she's like, okay, well then I'll touch this. And he's like, no. And he's like, okay, but I have one thing to ask for you. And he's like, okay, what's that? He's like, touch this. And he puts his hands on her butt. Just as the doctor, aka Mina's father, comes in. And he's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I didn't. He touched me. It's like, you've only been engaged to my daughter for 5 years, and you go and touch her. Unbelievable. So that's entertaining, I suppose, too. It's yeah, a lot of really sick jokes, but the sick jokes are great. Like, you gotta appreciate this kind of stuff. I mean, if you've seen Young Frankenstein or Spaceballs or whatever, it's like the same kind of humor and whatever. So if that's up your alley, you'll probably love Dracula Dead and Loving It. Anyway, Van Helsing comes to this opinion. He's like, okay, we suspect it's Dracula, but we don't know for sure. There's one way to prove it. They throw this elaborate ball and they invite Dracula, and he shows up and asks Mina to dance and whatnot. And Renfield's there too, and he almost blows his cover by calling him Master. And he's like, don't call me Master, alright? And just piss off. But he's like, they invited me too, and he's like, okay. So now he's completely onto. He's like, all right, this is a trap for sure. But I'll just have to be extra careful not to blow my cover. Anyway, they've got a big mirror set up behind a curtain. So as he's dancing with Mina, and they're getting more and more elaborate, they drop the mirror, and you see no reflection. So Mina's dancing by herself, and Jonathan's all like, oh, she's doing pretty good for not having a partner. He just looks at him like, you're fucking stupid. Anyway, there are gasps, and Dracula's like, oh, I guess they think we're doing really good. So they go really elaborate. Like, he's throwing her in the air and stuff, and you're seeing it in the mirror and whatever. And then he finally catches himself in the mirror. He's like, you son of a bitch. You got me. All right. Throws a table through the mirror and all that stuff. And takes off with Mina, essentially. And they go back to this old, I think it's like a cathedral or something, like an abandoned one or whatever. And he runs there, and Renfield follows. Well, they lock Renfield up because they find him there too, and the guard throws him in. He's like, you're gonna be in here till the day you rot. And then 3 seconds later, he's like, you're free to go on good behavior. He's like, I've only been here a moment. But in that moment, we're incredibly well behaved. Anyway, Van Helsing and Jonathan basically busted him out because they figure, okay, we're gonna follow him. He'll go right to Dracula. Like, he's basically joined at the hip at this point, right? And that's exactly what happens. He tries to throw them off by like jumping left and right and like faking to go a different way. He's like, haha, I lost them. Because, yeah, that's how that works. Anyway, they follow him there, and Dracula's like, oh my god. Dracula and Mina are going up the stairs, and Renfield comes in, and Drac's like, oh my god, what are you doing? Like, nobody followed you. He's like, no, I lost them. And then you hear them. He went in there. Oh boy. Anyway. Dracula and Mina go, or Dracula's carrying Mina, and he takes her into this room and locks the door, and they're trying to smash down the door, and they do. And there's a little bit of a fight scene going on. Mina at this point still has some blood in her, so she's not dead. She's not like completely a vampire yet or anything. She's getting there though, I guess, because I mean, she did the seduction thing, right? But I think it's implied that she's not a vampire. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she is. I don't know. But anyway, there's a big fight. Obviously, Dracula overpowers pretty much everyone. Van Helsing grabs like an old cross and holds it up, and he's like, you know, vampires aren't, they're not religious, if you know what I mean. They're like militantly not religious, is one way to put it. Yeah, that happens. He ends up like getting free or whatever, and it's becoming daylight. So Van Helsing quickly runs to the window and like pulls off a couple of boards, and I think there's like a scene where he like pulls blinds or something, and Dracula's like, and it shows like grill marks across his chest, because why not, right? So he turns into a bat and flies up into the roof, and they're like, we gotta get him. And then Renfield, being the genius that he is, opens up a hatch in the roof and says, Master, come this way. And the light shines in and hits Dracula in his bat form. And as he's falling, a little fireball, he's like, you asshole. And he falls and bursts into flames, and all that's left is ashes. And Renfield comes in, he's crying, he's like, oh my god, Master. And he like scoops him up and puts him in the coffin and mushes the ash together and puts like a stupid little smiley face. Like, you're starting to look like yourself again. Anyway, at this point, Jonathan has taken Mina out, and Van Helsing is like, dude, you're free now, you know that, right? And he's like, oh my god, I am. I could be my own person. He's like, exactly. And I think the doctor's there too, and he's like, all right, come along, Renfield. And of course, his response is, yes, Master. So he's done. He's hopeless for life. Yeah. And then the last scene is Van Helsing opening the coffin and saying something in that language, getting the last word to Dracula, because he's dead. He can't respond after that, right? So anyway, that was the movie. The credits roll. So like I said, it's a kind of humor that you either love it or you hate it, right? I find it amusing. I do. It's stupid, but it's pretty entertaining. Like I said, if you've seen Spaceballs or Young Frankenstein, it's the same kind of humor as that. So if you're into that, you'll love it. And if you didn't, you won't. I mean, I don't know how else to say it like that. It's, you know, a little bit of lowbrow humor, but some of the gags were good, like the oh, and yeah, there's another scene too at the very beginning where he comes down with, like, you know, the Bram Stoker Dracula movie from the 90s where he has like the big poof hair. So he has that too, and he takes it off, and it's like a little hat apparently. So that was something that was kind of amusing. Yeah, and then like the whole bug eating scene and the anima ongoing joke and little things like even when he's like they deserved it when they were talking about Vlad the Impaler. It's just silly things like that. I can't really comment on the acting because they're all going over the top, right? So I mean, it's Leslie Nielsen. He's doing his typical thing. Mel Brooks, all the actors are basically doing their thing for that kind of a movie. So you can't really comment on the acting. It worked obviously for what it was, so that's fine. The music I don't really remember it, except for like the Dracula's wives, whatever, with the choir that like stopped when Dracula tells them to cut it out. Again, that was a funny scene too. Yeah, all in all, entertaining. I mean, it's not a legendary. Well, I mean, it's somewhat, I guess, for that kind of a comedy, but it's not like a Citizen Kane or anything like that, which I haven't seen, so I can't even know. Okay, it's not like a Scarface. Like, I love Scarface, but it's not that quality of film, but it's a comedy, so what do you want me to say? Should you watch it? Yeah, if you're in the mood for something really stupid that, like, you can just turn your brain off and laugh at, yeah, it's fun. It's a good time. What am I going to rate it? I am going to rate it a... Let's give it a 6.2. I think that's pretty reasonable. Yeah, 6.2. Again, it's lowbrow humor. If you're into that, you know, you'll like it. Or again, like I said, if you want to just turn your brain off and watch a movie with some silly stuff that you can laugh at, it's perfect for that. Yeah, so that's about it, really. I don't know what else to say about it, to be completely honest. Check it out. It's fun. Oh, shit. Happy April Fool's Day, I guess, too, right? Because that's today. That was the whole reason I watched this, too, and I didn't even mention it. Anyway, well, now I did, so mission accomplished. Goddamn. All right, have a good one.